Chapter 13. A young man's long, awkward, occasionally tragic, and frequently humiliating education in affairs of the heart. Part 2. The Dance. By the end of high school, I'd become a mogul. My tuck shop business had evolved into a mini empire that included selling pirated CDs I made at home. I'd convinced my mother, as frugal as she was, that I needed a computer for school. I didn't, but I was very convincing. And she broke down and got it for me. Thanks to the computer, the internet, and the fortunate gift of a CD writer from a friend, I was in business. I had two middlemen working for me, Bongani and Tom. They sold the CDs that I copied in exchange for a cut. I met Tom at the arcade at the Balfour Park Mall. Like Teddy, he lived nearby because his mom was a domestic worker. Tom was in my grade, but he went to a government school, Northview, a proper ghetto school. Tom handled my CD sales over there. Tom was a chatterbox, hyperactive, and a go. He was a real hustler, too, always trying to cut a deal, work an angle. He could get people to do anything. A great guy, but totally crazy, and a and a complete liar as well. I went with him once to Hammanskral, a settlement that was like a homeland, but not really. Hammanskral, as its Afrikaans name suggests, was the kraal of Hamman, what used to be a white man's farm. The proper homelands, Venda and Gazankulu and Transkei, were places where black people actually lived, and the government drew a border around them and said, "Stay there." Hammanskral and settlements like it were empty places on the map where deported black people had been relocated. That's what the government did. They would find some patch of arid, dusty, useless land and dig row after row of holes in the ground, 1,000 latrines to serve 4,000 families. Then they'd forcibly remove people from illegally occupying some white area and drop them off in the middle of nowhere with some pallets of plywood and corrugated iron. "Here, this is your new home. Build some houses. Good luck." We'd watch it on the news, it was like some heartless, survival-based reality TV show, only nobody won any money. One afternoon in Hammanskral, Tom told me we were going to see a talent show. At the time, I had a pair of Timberland boots I'd bought. They were the only decent piece of clothing I owned. Back then, almost no one in South Africa had Timberlands. They were impossible to get, but everyone wanted them because American rappers wore them. I'd scrimped and saved my tuck shop money and my CD money to buy them. As we were leaving, Tom told me, "Be sure to wear your Timberlands." The talent show was in this little community hall attached to nothing in the middle of nowhere. When we got there, Tom was going around shaking hands, chatting with everybody. There was singing, dancing, some poetry. Then the host got up on stage and said, "Renale modi ragazzi yo o ngeth gileng kakopo amogelang spliff star." Meaning, we've got a special performer, a rapper, all the way from America. Please welcome Spliff Star. Spliff Star was Busta Rhymes' hype man at the time. I sat there confused. What? Spliff Star? In Hammanskral? Then everyone in the room turned and looked at me. Tom walked over and whispered in my ear, "Dude, come up on stage." "What? Come on stage." "Dude, what are you talking about?" "Dude, please, you're going to get me in so much trouble. They've already paid me the money." "Money? What money?" Of course, what Tom had failed to tell me was that he'd told these people he was bringing a famous rapper from America to rap in their talent show. He had demanded to be paid up front for doing so, and I, in my Timberlands, was that famous American rapper. "Screw you," I said. "I'm not going anywhere." "Dude, please, dude, I'm begging you. Please, do me this favor. Please, there's this girl here, and I want to get with her, and I told her I know all these rappers. Please, I'm begging you. Dude, I'm not Spliff Star. What am I going to do? Just rap Busta Rhymes songs. But I don't know any of the lyrics. It doesn't matter. These people don't speak English." So I got up on stage, and Tom did some terrible beatboxing while I stumbled through some Busta Rhymes lyrics that I made up as I went along. The audience erupted in cheers and applause. An American rapper had come to Hammanskral, and it was the most epic thing they had ever seen. That's Tom for you. One afternoon, Tom came by my house and we started talking about the upcoming matrix dance, what we call senior prom. I told him I didn't have a date, couldn't get a date, and wasn't going to get a date. I can get a girl to go with you to the dance, he said. No, you can't. Yes, I can. Let's make a deal. I don't want one of your deals, Tom. No, listen, here's the deal. If you give me a better cut on the CDs I'm selling, plus a bunch of free music for yourself, I'll come back with the most beautiful girl you've ever seen. And she'll be your date for the dance. Okay, I'll take that deal because it's never going to happen. The dance was still 2 months away. I promptly forgot about Tom and his ridiculous deal. Then he came over to my house one afternoon and popped his head into my room. I found the girl. Really? Yeah, you have to come and meet her. The two of us jumped up on a bus and headed into the city. The girl lived in a rundown block of flats downtown. We found her building, and a girl leaned over the balcony and waved us inside. That was the girl's sister, Lorato, Tom said. Come to find out, he'd been trying to get with Lorato, and setting me up with the sister was his way in, of course. It was dark in the lobby. The elevator was busted, so we walked up several flights. Lorato brought us into the flat. In the living room was this really, really enormous fat woman. Is this my date? I asked, knowing Tom was also a big joker. No, he said. This is not your date. This is her older sister. Your date is Babiki. Babiki has 3 older sisters, and Lorato is her youngest sister. Babiki's gone to the store to buy groceries. She'll be back in a moment. We waited, chatted with the older sister. 10 minutes later, the door opened, and the most beautiful girl I had ever seen in my life walked in. It was like she glowed. No girl at my high school looked anything like her. Hi, she said. Hi, I replied. I was dumbfounded. I had no idea how to talk to a girl that beautiful. Luckily, Tom was a guy who just talked and talked. He jumped right in and smoothed everything over. Trevor, this is Babiki. Babiki? Trevor. He went on and on about how great I was, how much Babiki was looking forward to the dance, when I would pick her up for the dance, all the details. We hung out for a few, and then Tom needed to get going, so we headed out the door. Babiki turned and smiled at me and waved as we left. Bye! Bye! We walked out of that building. I was the happiest guy on earth. Over the following weeks, we went down to Hillbrow a few more times to hang out with Babiki and her sisters and friends. Babiki's family was Pedi, one of South Africa's smaller tribes. The Pedi are what we call Amabhujua. They're as poor as most other black people, but they try to act like they're not. They dress fashionably and act rich. Amabhujua will put a shirt on a layaway, one shirt, and spend 7 months paying it off. They'll live in shacks, wearing Italian leather shoes that cost thousands. An interesting crowd. Babiki and I never went on a date alone. It was always the two of us in a group. She was shy, and I was a nervous wreck most of the time, but we had fun. Tom kept everyone loose and having a good time. Whenever we'd say goodbye, Babiki would give me a hug, and once she even gave me a little kiss. I was in heaven. As the dance approached, I started getting anxious. I didn't have a car. I didn't have any decent clothes. This was my first time taking out a beautiful girl, and I wanted it to be perfect. After Abel's garage went out of business, he had moved his workshop to the house. We had a big yard and a garage in the back, and that became his new workshop, essentially. At any given time, we had at least 10 or 15 cars in the driveway, in the yard, or out on the street. Clients' cars being worked on and old junkers Abel kept around to tinker with. One afternoon, Tom and I were at the house. Tom was telling Abel about my date, and Abel decided to be generous. He said I could take a car for the dance. There was a red Mazda that we'd had for a while, a complete piece of junk, but it worked well enough. I'd borrowed it before, but the car I really wanted was Abel's BMW. It was old and beat up like the Mazda, but a crappy BMW is still a BMW. I begged him to let me take it. Not a chance. Please, this is the greatest moment in my life, please. No, you can take the Mazda. Tom, always the hustler and the deal maker, stepped in. Brah, AB, he said. I don't think you understand. If you saw the girl, you would see why this is so important. Let's make a deal. If we bring her here and she's the most beautiful girl you've ever seen, you'll let him take the BMW. Abel thought about it. Okay, deal. We went to Babiki's flat, told her my parents wanted to meet her, and brought her to my house. Then we brought her around back to the garage, where Abel and his guys were working. Tom and I went over and introduced them. Abel smiled big, was charming as always. Nice to meet you, he said. They chatted for a few minutes. Tom and Babiki left. Abel turned to me. Is that the girl? Yes. You can take the BMW. Once I had the car, I desperately needed something to wear. I was taking out this girl who was really into fashion, and except for my Timberlands, everything I owned was awful. I was limited in my wardrobe choices because I was stuck buying from the shops my mother let me go to, and my mother did not believe in spending money on clothes. She'd take me to some bargain clothing store and tell me what our budget was, and I'd have to find something to wear. At the time, I had no clue about clothes. My idea of fashion was a brand of clothing called Powerhouse. It was the kind of stuff weightlifters wear in Miami or at Venice Beach. Baggy track pants with baggy sweatshirts. The logo was a cartoon of this giant bodybuilding bulldog wearing wraparound sunglasses and smoking a cigar and flexing his muscles. I thought Powerhouse was the baddest thing in the world. I had Powerhouse everything, the full range. 5 of the same outfit in 5 different colors. It was easy. The pants came with the top, so I knew how to make it work. Bongani, the other middleman from my CD business, found out I had a date, and he made it his mission to give me a makeover. You need to up your game, he said. You cannot go to the dance looking the way you look. For her sake, not yours. Let's go shopping. I went to my mom and begged her to give me money. She finally relented and gave me 2,000 rand for one outfit. It was the most money she'd ever given me for anything in my life. I told Bongani how much I had to spend, and he said we'd make it work. The trick to looking rich, he told me, is to have one expensive item, and for the rest of the things, you get basic, good-looking quality stuff. The nice item will draw everyone's eye, and it'll look like you've spent more than you have. In my mind, nothing was cooler than the leather coats everybody wore in The Matrix. The Matrix came out while I was in high school, and it was my favorite movie at the time. I loved Neo. In my heart, I knew, I am Neo. He's a nerd. He's useless at everything, but secretly, he's a fierce superhero. All I needed was a bald, mysterious black man to come into my life and show me the way. I told Bongani I wanted a leather coat like Keanu Reeves wore, the ankle-length black one. Bongani shut that down. No, that's not practical. It's cool, but you'll never be able to wear it again. We bought a calf-length black leather jacket, which would look ridiculous today, but at the time, thanks to Neo, was very cool. That alone cost 1,200 rand. When we finished the outfit with a pair of simple black pants, suede square-toed shoes, and a cream white knitted sweater. Once we had the outfit, Bongani took a long look at my enormous afro. I was forever trying to get the perfect 1970s Michael Jackson afro. What I had was more buckwheat, unruly and impossible to comb, like stabbing a pitchfork into a bed of crabgrass. We need to fix that hair of yours, Bongani said. What do you mean? I said. This is just my hair. No, we have to do something. Bongani lived in Alexandra. He dragged me there, and we went to talk to some girls from his street who were hanging out on the corner. What would you do with this guy's hair? He asked them. The girls looked me over. He has so much, one of them said. Why doesn't he cornrow it? Yeah, the others agreed. Great idea. I said, what? Cornrows? No. No, they said. Do it. Bongani dragged me to a hair salon down the street. We went in and sat down. The woman touched my hair, shook her head, and turned to Bongani. I can't work with this sheep, she said. You have to relax it. I don't do that here. Bongani dragged me to a second salon. I sat down in the chair, and the woman took my hair and started painting this creamy white stuff in it. She was wearing rubber gloves to keep the chemical relaxer off her own skin, which should have been my first clue that maybe this wasn't such a great idea. Once my hair was full of the relaxer, she told me, "You have to try to keep it in for as long as possible. It's going to start burning. When it starts burning, tell me and we'll rinse it out. But the longer you can handle it, the straighter your hair will become." I wanted to do it right, so I sat in the chair and waited for as long as I could. She should have told me to tell her when it started tingling, because by the time it was actually burning, it had already taken off several layers of my scalp. I started to freak out. She rushed over to the sink and started to rinse the relaxer out. What I didn't know is that the chemical doesn't really start to burn until it's being rinsed out. I felt like someone was pouring liquid fire onto my head. When she was done, I had patches of acid burns all over my scalp. I was the only man in the salon. It was all women. It was a window into what women experience to look good on a regular basis. Why would they ever do this? I thought. This is horrible. But it worked. My hair was completely straight. Bongani then dragged me back to the first salon, and the woman agreed to cornrow my hair. She worked slowly. It took 6 hours. Finally she said, "Okay, you can look in the mirror." She turned me around in the chair, and I looked in the mirror, and I had never seen myself like that before. It was like the makeover scenes in American movies, where they take the dorky guy or girl and fix the hair and change the clothes, and the ugly duckling becomes the swan. I'd been so convinced I'd never get a date that I never tried to look nice for a girl, so I didn't know that I could. The hair was good. My skin, which since puberty had been afflicted with a bad acne, and I mean the kind that qualifies as a medical condition called acne vulgaris, wasn't perfect, but it was getting better. The pustules, the big pus-filled blackheads and the whiteheads that started on my forehead, spread down the sides of my face and covered my cheeks and neck and ravaged me everywhere, had receded into regular pimples. I looked not bad. I went home and my mom squealed when I walked in the door. Everyone in my family loved it. The big night finally arrived. Tom came over to help me get ready. The hair, the clothes, everything worked together perfectly. Once I was set, we went to Abel to get the keys to the BMW, and that was the moment the whole night started to go wrong. It was Saturday night, which meant Abel was drinking with his workers. I walked out to his garage, and as soon as I saw his eyes, I knew. He was wasted. "Ah, you look nice," he said with a big smile, looking me over. "Where are you going?" "Where am I? Abby, I'm going to the dance. Can I get the keys to the car?" "What car?" "The BMW. You promised I could drive the BMW to the dance." "First, go buy me some beers," he said. He gave me his car keys. Tom and I drove to the liquor store. I bought Abel a few cases of beer, drove back, and unloaded it for him. "Okay," I said, "can I take the BMW now?" "No, but you promised. You said I could take it." "Yeah, but I need the car." I was crushed. I sat there with Tom and begged Abel for close to half an hour. Finally, we realized it wasn't going to happen. We took the junky Mazda and drove to Babiki's house. I was an hour late picking her up. She was clearly upset. Tom had to go in and convince her to come out, and eventually she did, in an amazing red dress. She was even more gorgeous than before, but she was not in a great mood. I was quietly starting to panic, but I smiled and kept trying my gentlemanly best to be a good date, holding the door for her, telling her how beautiful she was. Tom and the younger sister gave us a send-off, and we headed out. Then I got lost. The dance was being held at some venue in a part of town I wasn't familiar with, and at some point I got completely turned around and had no idea where I was. I drove around for an hour in the dark, going left, going right, doubling back. I was on my cell phone the whole time, desperately calling people, trying to figure out where I was, trying to get directions. Babiki sat next to me in stony silence the whole time, clearly not feeling me or this night at all. I was crashing hard. I finally figured out where I was, and we made it to the dance, nearly 2 hours late. I parked, jumped out, ran around to get her door. When I opened it, she just sat there. "Are you ready?" I said. "Let's go in." "No." "But we need to go inside. The dance is inside." "No." I stood there for another 20 minutes, trying to convince her to come inside, but she kept saying no. She wouldn't get out of the car. Not knowing what else to do, I ran inside and found Bongani. We went back into our parking lot, and the second Bongani saw Babiki, he lost it. Jesus in heaven! This is the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. You said she was beautiful, Trevor, but this is insane. In an instant, he completely forgot about helping me. He turned and ran back inside and called to the guys, who came running out into the parking lot. 20 of them clustered around the car. Yo, she's so hot. Dude, this girl came with Trevor? Guys were gawking at Babiki like she was an animal at the zoo. They were asking to take pictures with her. They were calling back to more people inside. This is insane! Look at Trevor's date! No, you gotta come and see. I was mortified. I'd spent 4 years of high school carefully avoiding any kind of romantic humiliation whatsoever. And now, on the night of the matrix dance, the night of all nights, my humiliation had turned into a circus bigger than the event itself. Babiki sat in the passenger seat, staring straight ahead, refusing to budge. I was outside the car, pacing, stressed out. A friend of mine had a bottle of brandy that he'd smuggled into the dance. Here, he said, have some of this. Nothing mattered at that point, so I started drinking. I'd messed up. The girl didn't like me. The night was done. Most of the guys eventually wandered back to the dance. I was sitting on the pavement, taking swigs from the brandy bottle. At some point, Bongani went back over to the car to try one last time to convince Babiki to come in. After a minute, his head popped up over the car with this confused look on his face. Yo, Trevor, he said, your date does not speak English. What? Your date, she does not speak any English. That's not possible. I got up and walked over to the car. I asked Babiki a question in English, and she gave me a blank stare. Bongani looked at me. How did you not know that your date does not speak English? I don't know. Have you never spoken to her? Of course I have. Or wait, have I? I started flashing back through all the times I'd been with Babiki. It dawned on me that in all the excitement of hanging out together, we had never actually spoken to each other. It had always been through Tom. Tom had promised he'd get me a beautiful date for the dance, but he hadn't made any promises about any of her other qualities. Whenever we were together, she was speaking Pedi to Tom, and Tom was speaking English to me. But Babiki didn't speak English, and I didn't speak Pedi. Abel spoke Pedi. He'd learned several South African languages to deal with his customers, so he'd spoken with Babiki fluently when they met. In that moment, I realized I'd never actually heard her say anything in English other than yes, no, hi, bye. Babiki was so shy that she didn't talk much to begin with, and I'd been mesmerized by her beauty and just the idea of her. I didn't know I was supposed to talk with her. I just nodded and smiled along and let Tom do the talking, which is how I'd been dating a girl for over a month, the girl I very much believed was my first girlfriend, without ever having had a single conversation with her. Now the whole night came rushing back, and I saw it from her point of view. She probably hadn't wanted to go to the dance with me in the first place. She probably owed Tom a favor, and Tom could talk anyone into anything. Then I'd left her waiting for me for an hour, and she was not happy. Then she got into the car, and it was the first time we'd ever been alone, and she realized I couldn't even hold a conversation with her. I'd driven her around and gotten lost in the dark. She was probably terrified. When we got to the dance, she didn't speak anyone's language. She didn't know anyone. She didn't even know me. Bongani and I stood outside the car, staring at each other. I didn't know what to do. I tried talking her into every language I knew. Nothing worked. She only spoke Pedi. I got so desperate that I started trying to talk to her using hand signals. Please, you, me, inside, dance? Yes? No. So I never got to go to my matrix dance. I spent the whole night in the parking lot. When the dance ended, I climbed back into the junky red Mazda and drove Babiki home. We sat in total awkward silence the whole way. I pulled up in front of her block of flats in Hillbrow, stopped the car, and sat for a moment as I tried to figure out the polite and gentlemanly way to end the evening. Then, out of nowhere, she leaned over and gave me a kiss. Like a real kiss. A proper kiss. The kind of kiss that made me forget that the whole disaster had just happened. I was so confused. I didn't know what I was supposed to do. She pulled back, and I looked deep into her eyes and thought, I have no idea how girls work. I got out of the car, walked around to her side, and opened the door. She gathered up her dress and stepped out and headed toward her flat. And as she turned to go, I gave her one last little wave. Bye. Bye.